Hi friends, Jeff Hopper back with Jeff Cranford.
Hello.
And we have been talking about who really is a Christian, and over time, now with these many conversations, we've talked about marks of someone who's hot in their followership.
Yes.
We've talked about someone who demonstrates humility toward the Father and mercy toward others. And so we're getting to characteristics of those who are more mature in the faith. Last time we talked about someone who was maybe a new believer. But if a new believer sat down to you and said, Jeff, I'm really trying to push ahead, are there particular practices, perspectives, things that you would kind of coach them in as they intentionally move toward a more mature faith?
Yes. Well, many of you will have been around some of the teaching, but one of the core teachings that I've always loved to teach, especially early believers and even people who have been following the Lord for a while, is out of 1 Corinthians 10, where Paul says all these things, and he's referring back to the Exodus of the children of Egypt, children of Israel out of Egypt, through the Red Sea, into the wilderness, crossing the Jordan potentially, and getting into the land flowing with milk and honey. And he says all these things were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. So there's a template there, and I've gone into great detail in various, sometimes 15 and 16-week series on this. But in general, someone very often who's been following for a while but still find themselves in the wilderness, in the proverbial wilderness. So my encouragement for someone who's been following for a while, who's been through some of the disciplines of faith and has learned to, read the Word and beginning to have a grasp of the Word, beginning to develop a prayer life, etc., they've learned this in the wilderness, and then to take the next step is to say, your desire now is to get out of the wilderness, to cross the Jordan and move into the deeper callings of God, and move into what the purpose for which you were created. That doesn't happen in the early stages of your faith, and it shouldn't happen. In fact, Paul says you don't want to put a new believer into a place of leadership. They may fall into the same condemnation that the devil himself fell into. Gets kind of deep in what that really means, but the point is we wait for maturation in the wilderness, where they learn to hear the Lord speak. They understand what it is to feel when the Lord's giving them direction more easily than they did when they were a baby. A baby can hear the general tenor of the mother's voice and knows it's her mother or his mother, but not necessarily what they're saying. We need to learn and hear specific instruction. So my encouragement is, in the wilderness, to begin to have a really strong vision to get out of the wilderness. And what will it take? And that's Caleb and Joshua's attitudes, and those things don't come overnight. It's passing tests. It's progressing in the faith, where and Paul told Timothy, a relatively new believer this time, do these things, absorb yourselves in these things, so that your progress may be evident to everybody, and in doing so, you'll ensure salvation not only for yourself, but you'll ensure salvation for those who are under your care, for those who hear you, who hear your teaching, who hear your lives, who see and sense your life. It's radically important that we absorb ourselves. So part of that is absorption into the ways of the Father. And you can't do that in isolation. It takes community, it takes the body, the total body. Whether you find that in a local community church, or you find it in a links group, or you find it somewhere else, got to find that connectiveness. We can say, we're getting out of this wilderness. We're not going to stay here forever. We're going to move into the purpose for which we were created.
I like that. Let's talk a little bit more next time about someone who is, really mature and has the ability to do what you talked about, have their faith affect others as well.
Perfect.